the big question of, I would like maybe each of our panelists here to comment on what's their opinion on the one big positive of the 1 year performance, and also one big negative, right? So maybe we can start with Rosanna first at the far right.
Thank you very much, Ira. Good evening, everyone. Yes, positives and negatives. Definitely there are positives, bukan tak ada langsung. So, we did see the passing of the provision on stalking in the penal code earlier this year. And that is something that's great because women's NGOs have been pushing for this for quite some time. However, I would also like to add that, we've had the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act that was passed by the previous government, but the implementation of this act still hasn't begun yet because we're supposed to have names, members of the tribunal. There's supposed to be a tribunal to go through the cases, and these members have yet to be named. And I'm a little bit concerned and, worried about how there have been in the past, even from way back when the Domestic Violence Act was passed in 1994. It took another 2 years for the act to be implemented, and women's groups actually had to go out and show and express themselves their unhappiness about why this act is taking so long to pass. So we may have to keep an eye on that because that is something that was passed previously, but the government right now has the responsibility to make sure that the implementation carries through. And of course, the biggest disappointment is with regards to the Citizenship Act. Again, another issue that didn't begin just recently. It's been fought over many, many years, over many, many governments. And yet, there was this issue of proposals to also amend the federal constitution and take away existing provisions, that are guaranteeing rights. Words like operation in law, they want to take that away. And I really wonder what is the vision of the Madani government. Why do they want to create, the situations of people being stateless? When people are stateless, they don't get their rights. When they don't get their rights, they suffer. And so this is something that we really need to sit down and ask the Madani government, where is their commitment? Yes, I think came out in the papers yesterday, it's been forwarded to the Council of Conference of Rulers and all of this, but we cannot take our eyes off because in the first place, why did they have to make changes to provisions that have already been there since Merdeka, that justification has not been given in a way that is clear, and in a way that what is the reasoning? We don't see that. And of course, I think when it comes to the narratives on women's rights, it's been really, really frustrating. There isn't any clear, when you look at the Madani, 6, pillars, there isn't anything that speaks clearly about, the place of women and the role of women. And, in this post GE15 with, political Islam still being piped out and how they are affecting women so directly, for example, the state of Terengganu. Saying that, no women or girls to perform gymnastics in sports anymore. That's a unilateral decision that didn't take into account how many years, these girls and their families have been putting time and effort into training themselves to take part in the sports that they are in. And now I think just this evening, Kelantan wants to have a discussion with the Youth and Sports Ministry regarding the attire for the for the 2028 Sukma. So the question on attire is something that is so tiresome. And that's the only thing that, I think there can be clear and strong messaging and not to pander to the way how certain political parties think, Malaysian women should be dressed. We have been in existence in our diversity for such a long time. You know, let us remain who we are and be able to contribute to the country in all the various spaces and areas in the best way that we know how. And if you don't like it, don't watch. Avert your eyes.
Thank you, everyone. I think Anwar's biggest achievement is to have been staying alive for 1 year. It's a big contrast. You compare at one point, we have the same Prime Minister for 22 years, and then in the last 5 years, you basically have 5 Prime Ministers. And so what Anwar might have been achieving for now 20% is that we may see the first full-term government, if that's what he wants. That's it. That's I think is the biggest thing. But it's no small matters. If you look at it, even though that you may not see much of the improvement in the economy and so on, largely because a lot of issues are international. No government here can decide what the Federal Reserve in America would decide on what interest rate, for example. But having been sort of providing the stability, you do see some directions. We have some goals that I think is important if we can actually achieve it within 10 years, like to have 60% of participations of women workforce, to have 45% of the GDP go to laborers or employees. These are important goals. And while we are not there yet, I think this should not be dismissed. This is very different if you compare to the last 2 governments, or you can look at it that the last parliament, the 14th parliament. What about the biggest letdown? I think it seems that Anwar has a trouble to outgrow his old self in UMNO. And by this, I'm not talking about that he's pandering to the right, talking about Malay Muslim nationalist language. It's more than that. It's about the use of both identity politics and patronage politics to suppress the opposition. And I have to say that you cannot put all the blame on him, because half of PN supporters are very happy to see PN, or maybe more than half, to see PN punished. Because our politics has become so toxic and so partisan that people like to see people with whom they disagree with to be marginalized. And they think that that is for the greater good of the people. Because in their notion, the people is only people, those who share the same aspirations and value with them, not people from the other side. And that's the problem with Anwar, because that if you go back to the old Malaysia, where Prime Minister can last for decades or at least years instead of months, to be in power is basically to suppress competition. It's not about making your oppositions more constructive, more professional, but it's to make them unelectable so that people look at you and say, this is the devil we know. As much as we don't like it, this is the person this is the only party we can vote in. And I'm seeing that coming back. And not necessarily because Anwar consciously want to do it. I think it's rather that not just people in the government, but the nation at large, if you like, have not put enough effort to think through how shall we structure our democracy, our multi-party competition. If you do not actively think through that how the parties are going to compete, having election can be disastrous. That's actually a common argument used against democracy in many authoritarian countries. And I hate to say, for many Malaysians who call themselves liberals, deep down, many people are actually authoritarian. They do not trust the population. They find it daunting, sometimes unworthy to engage the population because they think that the other side, people who disagree with them are so stupid or so evil. What's the point? And so they expect the government they elect in, they put in power that would carry out their wishes in the name of political will. So I wouldn't put all the blame on Anwar. I think there is a danger that out of this transition from a one-party dominance, we may not move on to a healthy and functional multi-party democracy. Instead, we may take a long wave to go back to the old structure. And to make it worse, if you're going to keep this sort of two-party system, two-coalition system now, I can assure you that we are no longer having two multi-ethnic coalitions that are supposedly to compete in the middle. What we have had since 2018 is a binary competition that is very toxic between a multi-ethnic bloc and a mono-ethnic bloc. You first have PH, the first PH is multi-ethnic government, but the opposition, UMNO and PAS, was multi-ethnic. Then, for the next two governments, they were mono-ethnic, and you have a multi-ethnic opposition. And now you have a multi-ethnic government, but you also have a mono-ethnic opposition. If this were to continue, mark my words, the mono-ethnic one would grow stronger and stronger because it appeals to the insecurities of half of the population. Unless Anwar can see himself from a higher perspective and want to lead this country out of this rather than just thinking about how to extend his power, we'll be caught. Thank you.
I think I will agree with Chin Huat about the political stability part. I think that is the main positive about Anwar so far. He has actually brought some political stability, and he now commands two-thirds majority plus 3 seats, so it's not likely that he will be displaced anytime soon. For that to happen, you have to get both UMNO as well as a Sarawak bloc to move, which is not very likely. And when you look at within Harapan itself, why would anybody want to move to the other side when they are in power? Yeah? So I think his position is quite strong at this point of time. So, but what I think disappoints is that despite his strength in the numbers that he already has, he is not doing the right things in terms of other things, and he appears to be pandering too much towards UMNO, and that is where his weakness lies, because UMNO is actually no longer a strong party. You know, it won less than half the seats that it won in the previous elections, 26 seats, and 4 other seats from its other BN partners. So it's a party which has largely been rejected by the electorate. And unless he offers something more than what UMNO can offer the electorate, he's going to have major problems in the next elections, especially with PAS and PN basically strongly playing the racial and religious line and appearing to make much headway along that. So under those kind of circumstances, I see his only way out as revitalizing the economy and giving a better life for everybody. And he's got 4 years to do it, and if he doesn't do it, I think he will have problems at the next polls. So if you look at the economy, there is a lot of structural change which is requires. I mean, we have been talking endlessly about the debt, but there is no plan actually to try and reduce the debt levels. You know? So you need to raise the revenue, that's the first thing, and you need to cut down on expenditures. So how do you raise the revenue? I would say still the only best way to do it is the GST, yeah? Which is a value-added tax, and which over 180 countries throughout the world have implemented without much of a problem. So this, if you compare to the GST to the SST previously, when GST was first imposed in April 2015, the amount of annual revenue that it incrementally increased by was 22 billion. So collection went up from 22 billion under the old sales and service tax to when it was converted to the GST. So it's a very powerful way of increasing revenue and to recover revenue which may have been lost through tax evasion. And also it's a very powerful tool to actually stop tax evasion, because customs and income tax can actually share their data to see whether it tallies. So that's something that should be done. And then there was no capital gains tax in the right areas. I mean, what's wrong with capital gains tax? For those who make money in the stock market. So you should tax those profits, and many countries actually have done it. And all developed countries have a system of capital gains tax. It does not need to be much, about 10 to 15%, but it's actually useful revenue. So that's on the revenue side. You could have done a lot more. I don't believe that the luxury tax will do anything very much as far as that is concerned. The other thing on the expenditure side, the major problem is the subsidy. So you have to implement the subsidy rationalization scheme. So that is crucial. But I think Rafisi made an announcement today that it will be introduced in 24. So that's taking a long time for them to announce what kind of subsidy rationalization it is. So the biggest part of it, of course, is the fuel subsidies. And I think it is time now, since he is in a strong position of power, for Anwar to take some of the badly needed and unpopular measures and say, for instance, and allow fuel prices to increase. So we will all complain about that. But you see, actually, those people in the lower income group do not suffer a lot from fuel prices, because they don't drive around cars. They drive basically on motorbikes and things like that, so which doesn't cost them a lot. So the government's plan to actually subsidize them directly through grants is the right way to go, so that all the rich people are not being subsidized for fuel and so on. So those are the main points I have for now. I think Nades will probably deal with corruption, so I'll leave that to him.
Let me start by saying the only thing Anwar has been consistent on is his oratorical skills. They have not changed from the day he was in ABIM, later in government, and later as for a while as the leader of the opposition. Of course, I certainly all of us will welcome the not abolishment of the death penalty, but passing the burden to the judiciary. It is not certainly abolishing the death penalty. Of course, there are minor laws, sexual harassment, stalking, etc. Changes have been made to the penal code. Before Anwar came to power, rather, the party manifesto clearly stated they would abolish the Seditions Act and the Printing Press and Publications Act. We all have seen what happened in the case of the Swatch watches. They used the PPA just like what the AMNO used when they banned the yellow color T-shirts with Bersay on it. You all remember that? Okay? It's replica or a repetition of that. The PPPA has been misused and abused. And just when you thought the press is a bit freer, we have come across instances of websites getting blocked, journalists being pulled up for questioning. Has anything changed? Now, one of the issues I want to touch on is corruption. When Anwar started with a big bang, we'll fight corruption. At every other instance he was talking about corruption, he'll go after the big fish. What have we seen? Nothing much, right? Those who had previously been charged were under the previous government, not the UMNO past government, but the PKR government itself, right? And since then, things seem to have slowed down, although Anwar, Rapizi, and the whole gang, including Guaning, were making big issue over the LCS scandal involving our ships. What has come to that? They've just gone silent. For the first 3 months, since Anwar came in, it was nothing else but talking about corruption, corruption, corruption. All right? Okay, the ministers took a 20% pay cut. No, everybody applauded. But if you look at the recent trips made by Anwar, his entourage, wherever he went, when he went to the US, no less than 30 people were with him. Right? So you calculate the gains he made by the 20% salary cut, and look at the amount of money being spent on all these hangers-on. What is the Mantri Besar of Perak doing at the UN? What was he doing there? So all these hangers-on are being rewarded. The next thing I want to touch on is no more political appointment in government agencies and GLCs. A big bang announcement. How long did it last? It just took 2 months for Zahid Hamidi to announce the appointment of an UMNO stalwart as chairman of Velcra. So right now, at the last count, there were 64 appointments, political appointees, sitting on GLCs and government agencies. So, what can I say? Was it the talk of a snake oil salesman? As I once said in one of my columns. Now, fighting corruption, you must have someone to lead, someone with clean hands. Azam Bakis, my brother, did it, story. It's hard for anyone to swallow. And Ismail Sabri exonerated him. Anwar gave him a further extension when you're supposed to go. And what do you expect? On top of it, Anwar has the cheek to go and tell the audience in Singapore, the AG explained why Zahid Hamidi was the charges against him were withdrawn. Now, the AG is supposed to be independent, apolitical. What business has he got to brief the Prime Minister on anything? So this talk about corruption is just empty talk. Nothing is going to change at all. People will continue talking. The politicians will carry on making money. And we, the taxpayers, will be the suckers paying for all these extras. So, if you ask me to give a report card for the first 12 months, I would give the government and Anwar D-. Thank you.